Badger fans, let's talk about some of the other teams on the Badger schedule. Are they scarier now that we've seen week one? Plus, some stock up players, some reasons not to freak out, some positives. We'll get into that. Locked On Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. I'm your host, Ryan Harings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for listening wherever you are, wherever you're finding us, audio, video, whatever it is. Thank you so much. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Brand new mobile game, completely free, no ads, 100% playable offline. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps inside the game store to receive your free boost to your program. Begin your coaching legacy today, Ultimate College Football Head Coach. All right, let's bring on Curtis. Man, we haven't had Curtis on. We had him on before the year. We haven't really talked, you and me, on the Discord a little bit before the show a little bit, but we're going to talk big picture thoughts week one. I want to start here, though, with some of the Badgers teams that are on the schedule that you were able to see week one. Are these teams, USC, Bama, Nebraska, a little scarier or not scarier after you've seen them play?
Yeah, and, I wanted to address some takes that I had earlier. You could throw me in the Locked On Liar camp for some of these. I will say this. I think that teams looked a lot better than I think, I had initially anticipated. What I'll say about USC, those receivers they might be one of the best groups in the Big Ten, honestly. Watching Ohio State, watching Oregon, what they did, they somewhat struggled with an FCS opponent. But USC's receivers, man, they were dogs. They were getting the ball. They were fighting for yards. They were playing tough. Something I never thought I would describe USC as is tough, and they looked tough on Sunday. Now, I will say, pump the brakes a little bit. We did see Mordecai do pretty much the exact same thing against that LSU defense 8 months ago. Yep. And when you look at what they did in the portal, they brought in Pius. We definitely could have used him on Friday, but they didn't do a ton, and so their defense made a lot of the same mistakes they made last year. It didn't really look like much improved. So we'll see how the season plays out for them. But I was really impressed by that team's performance on Sunday.
Yeah, I'll hit Nebraska a little bit. Penn State. I thought Raiola looked the part. Like it's week one. It's UTEP. It's not a marquee opponent, but for a true freshman with a ton of hype starting his first game, I thought he looked the part, and he's only going to get better. Quite frankly, Iowa dropped 40. Started slowly, but I think if you're an Iowa fan, you got to be thrilled at being able to drop at least that many points, even though competition has started slow. I think for the most part,
they scored 5 passing touchdowns in the last 2 years, and they had 3 in this game, that's
incredible. Iowa should be heading.
Good for you, Iowa. You know what? Welcome to the 21st century. We're proud of you. Incredible performance. Although we scored 38 against Illinois State, 38-0 the year we fired our previous coach. So don't go crazy just yet. It's a long season.
Listen, 100%. But I'm just saying, like, if you're an Iowa fan and you score 40, the rest of the context doesn't even matter, right? You're going to the cornfields and you're throwing a rager. Like that is like the greatest offensive explosion in 3 years for you. So I feel like most of the Big Ten looked pretty good. Oregon aside, we talked about that a little bit. Mm-hmm. Minnesota lost, but they did play UNC at least. And they were in a position to kick a field goal to win that game. I thought the Big Ten showed out pretty well week one, all things considered.
I think so. I mean, if you're a Big Ten fan right now, you got to be feeling pretty good about the way the teams performed. You got to be feeling good. A lot of teams played some FCS opponents, who were able to get some points in there, which I think is important. I think, if you're an Illinois fan, you leave a game playing Eastern Illinois 49-0. I think you're feeling a little better today than maybe we were coming off of Friday night, only beating Western Michigan by 2 touchdowns. So you got to be feeling good if you're a Big Ten fan. The team I wanted to touch on that, we painted the picture as how we could beat this team, Ryan, but
we did.
I don't think that's going to matter. Alabama. The craziest thing about that game is it was 42-0 in the first half. Alabama had 5 to 10 minutes of possession total up until that point. Kalen DeBoer is a coach, he came up in the NAIA ranks and in the lower levels. And in those lower levels, you got to innovate on offense because you don't necessarily have the talent to just win on talent alone all the time. And what his offense does, it allows people to be wide open. It allows defenses to be out of position, to show their hand, to make it obvious what they're going to do. And so he was able to win with lesser talent because he was able to manipulate defenses and things like that. Kotelnicki and Penn State and Kansas, they do a lot of the same stuff. It's moving the defense around, get them out of position, showing what they're doing so you can make the reads easy and the offense easy to run. Now you add probably the most talented team in college football. On top of that, they were probably going to be open anyway because they're just so much more talented than everybody. And now you design the offense for them to be wide open with no one within 20 yards. Like, it's even if we outpossess them the whole game, I mean, they can score in a second. And that's where it's like, we'll see. I'm excited. I'll still be at that game. We'll see how it all plays out. But man, I think it's pretty easy for me. That's probably the most difficult team we play, and I don't think it's even close anymore. Especially what we saw from an Oregon and Penn State. I still think that they could Penn State it up a little bit and make.
For sure.
But man, that Alabama team, they were something.
Yeah, and DeBoer's a really smart coach. He knows what the weakness of the Wisconsin Badgers team is. Mm-hmm. Like we're gonna get into 2-4-5, 3-3-5 defensive line rotations. Maybe why we looked a little like we looked against Western Michigan. It's not gonna matter against Bama. Like we could play a 3-3-5, we could play a 4-2-5. It's not gonna matter probably. Like they're just going to bully us around. But let's do defense. Or no, what's your big picture takeaway that you want to dive into? Western Michigan week 1, Wisconsin wins 28-14. We are going to play a little bit of a game later called Do We Freak Out or Play It Cool, which the truth is usually somewhere in the middle of that. But what was your big picture takeaway week 1?
Yeah, so I left this game at first. I think like everybody, I was disappointed in the performance. I thought I want to say we played down to our competition, but I thought a lot of the things we'd heard coming in the offseason, some of the stuff that I had seen coming out of the practice and the stuff that you had seen as well, didn't really show up, and that was for me a little bit of a concern, obviously. But when you look back at the game, when you rewatch it, there's a couple cut-ups online of the whole, offense, defense, their whole game performance. Some of the things that I saw weren't as concerning as I think I initially thought they were. And I think a lot of our players right now are so worried of being unfairly, judged kind of off the first game performance, which I think is not necessarily accurate. So kind of to break it down, when the game started, it was very clear that Western Michigan came in with a better game plan than we did. I mean, that was evident from the jump. They knew out the gate, we're not going to be able to throw it on the secondary. They have 2 All-Americans back there. Their third guy is a 6'3" dude that was an All-American at D2, and he looks like he's much improved. They were probably reading our practice reports, probably watched our videos. They knew, hey, this secondary is probably the strength of this team. So let's just stay away from that. Let's just not mess with them. Instead, it sounds like the weakness on their team right now is D-line. It sounds like the weakness might be up the middle with linebacker. They had to upgrade it last year, but they haven't all played together yet. So maybe that's where we have an edge. And what they did, they came out in super tight sets, probably the tightest sets I've ever seen in Camp Randall. And we've watched a lot of Paul Christ's game. It almost looked like their guards were lined up inside of the legs of their tackle. I mean, they were packed in there tight. And then they put 2 tight ends, right on the edges, or maybe being 12 personnel, maybe even being 13 personnel. And watching them run the ball, they just all moved as one giant unit and just tried to flush whatever was in front of them out the way. And the problem with the way we were running defense to start the games, we were playing with 2 down linemen. And then we were playing with our 2 linebackers right at the line. So functionally, they were DNs. Well, you got a guy like a John Pius who was undersized when he came in here, has only played in the FCS as an outside linebacker, whose primary job was to pass rush. You got another guy in Daryl Peterson who's shorter than Pius is, probably weighs about 240-ish, also a guy who can get to the outside, maybe spell out a play, a run play to the wide side. And you have them now going up one-on-one with tackles and guards whose whole job is to push you off the line. That's already just fundamentally going to be a mismatch. You're not going to win that battle. I don't care if we're playing South Dakota. I don't care if we're playing Alabama. That's a mismatch. That's the wrong person to put in that spot for that role. If their job is to run stuff, that's not going to work, right? Now, they might be able to shoot a gap here. They might be able to do things here or there, and they did that to someone in the game. They played, especially in the second half. But it's the first game. It's clear that Western Michigan has zero interest in passing the ball. Playing a 2-4, to me, just is setting people up for failure. And luckily, I think the staff started to catch on. Hey, maybe this isn't the move. Maybe we need to play more D linemen. And at the time watching the game, you don't really know. Is it, hey, we really don't feel confident in our D line? Maybe the guys that we said we thought would play, maybe they're not really ready to go. So you kind of give some grace here and there. But then you listen to Luke Fickell this morning. He comes out and immediately says, yeah, we have Brandon Lane, we have Elijah Hills, we have Jalen Johnson. All of them should have played. They deserve to play. They've done everything they need to do to play, and they're going to play more next week. And it's like, well, dude, if that's the case, you need to run 3 down linemen. Mm-hmm. As soon as we shifted to that in the second half, you saw it immediately. They could not move the line when we played on 4th down. So this is the other thing that I noticed as well. And we had this last year. When we line up and it's, let's say, 4th and 1, or it's 4th and goal, right on the 1 yard line. our defense is really, really good up the middle on that. In fact, it's incredible up the middle. We had a ton of run stuffs last year on 4th and 1. This year we had one at the game. We had a 4th and 1 run stop where they had to get 1 yard. It took them 7 plays and 2 different drives to get in the end zone. Both times they scored, they were on the 1 yard line. It took them 3 plays and they scored on 4th down the first time. It took them 2 plays and they scored on 3rd down the second time. Obviously, you don't want to be in a position where you're on the 1 yard line. But the fact it took that many plays to get 1 yard twice is a great sign for our defense. And it tells me we do have the depth that can stop the run. My whole thing was it looked formationally like we were playing a formation that's not designed to do that. And that's where I look back at maybe not the players, because they're doing what they're asked to do. It's not Pius's fault that he's getting double teamed by linemen and can't bust that outside. But when you're doing that and that's your game plan, that to me is very concerning, because that's where it's clear that Western Michigan outcoached us.
Yeah, I have a bunch of thoughts, but I do think that they came in with an incredible game plan. And you were right. Like that offensive line that they have, not only were they attacking the weakness, but they were moving as a one unit. It was just zone blocking. There was nothing fancy. They weren't pulling backside. They weren't running counters. They weren't running traps. It was just a zone blocking scheme. We're going to wash you out. And then Buckley's a good back. Western Michigan does have a good back. You'd press the hole and you cut it back.
He was the MAC. I believe he was the MAC either Rookie of the Year or Player of the Year last year.
Had 1,000 yards last year, 10 tutties. Like he's a solid back. He could play in the Big Ten for some schools. I do want to ask you a little bit further about linebacker play after the break. I hear everything you're saying. I still think there were plays that could have been made by veteran linebackers where I feel like the run fits were a little wonky. And I don't know if it's a week one thing. I think some of it is just over aggressiveness. Week one, you overrun the play a little bit. I get that. But I do want to ask you about that coming up next. And we're also going to get into some vibe checks with the program. That's coming up next, Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show over at Ultimate College Football Head Coach. This is a great opportunity. If you want to kind of put yourself in the seat of being a coach, setting strategy, you can do that over at Ultimate Football Head Coach. Jump into the shoes and the bowels of a program, lead them to glory. Again, you get to set the strategy. You get to call the plays. If you want to be a version of Paul Christ or Gary Anderson or Barry Alvarez or Don Morton, whoever it is, you can be that person in the hot seat. Call the plays, set the strategy. Ultimate College Football Head Coach is completely free, has no ads, is 100% playable offline. You play as you go, as you want, when you want to. And of course, we have a great offer for our Locked On Badgers fans. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk, as it'll get your team off to an incredible start. Download the game, visit ultimate-cfb.com. Look it up in the app stores. That's Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Begin your coaching legacy today. I want to thank everybody for tuning in as always. Let's get back to Curtis here. Always a great guest, man. Curtis brings the knowledge. Love having him on the show. I want to push back just a little bit on, because I don't think I definitely hear your point, and I agree. As usual, I think you're really insightful with the way you look at the game. The 2-4-5 wasn't holding up, but then why was the coaching staff so reticent to change out of it? And like, I guess I don't understand. Then if we saw this, you saw it, why not go to 3-down linemen? And my theory is they just like the linebacking group more. They don't trust the depth in the 3-down linemen, which is why they don't want to play a bunch of 3-3-5.
Well, that absolutely could be the case. And it's tough to say. I mean, at this point, anything I say is pretty much just speculation based on what I've seen and what I know. But the thing about the 2-4-5 that always bugged me is it didn't work last year. You know, we sort of shifted our defense around. We played as nickel, and we played it a little bit more in the second half of the season, and you saw improvement on the defense. But if a team is trying to run the ball, it's never worked well. It didn't work when Jim Leonard ran it. That was our nickel package when Jim Leonard was our coach. I remember for some reason we kept lining up in that versus Ohio State that one year, and we just kept getting ran over. It wasn't even remotely close. And so, you know, it's things like that where I look at that, I'm like, this is obviously not a good defense against the run. And it was very clear early on that that's all Western Michigan wanted to do. They had some pass plays, you know, they had some rollouts, which are, you know, great against an aggressive pass rush. They had a lot of max protect, 7 guys protecting. And you say what you want about how the linebackers played. One, if you're getting ran over on your first down because you're playing in a position that I don't think is advantageous to you, and then you're expected to pass rush against a 7-man protection, like, it's not going to be a great game for you. So that was tough out the gate. But it was clear that they just wanted to run the ball. Why they didn't change, it's tough. You know, it could be maybe they feel, you know, the season's longer now. Maybe they feel that they're trying to rest guys. Maybe, to your point, they feel that their linebackers are better and they want to get them on the field as much as possible. Maybe, you know, maybe the coach just is stubborn and doesn't want to change. That's possible too. I've known players and coaches in the past that said, yeah, I've worked with coaches that they think their way is the best and that's all they're going to do. And if, it doesn't work, it doesn't matter because the players just aren't doing it right. Like that could be it too. I don't know. It's all speculation. It was encouraging that you saw some adjustments in going into the second half. That's always a good thing. But again, like if it's obvious, the thing that is always weird to me is just like, it's not like they were playing hurry up. It's not like they were moving fast. It's not like they didn't have time when we were on the sidelines. We were running our offense. We were running long drives too. They had some time to make changes and they didn't. And so, I think the thing that the reason why I'm more thinking it's maybe on the scheme was just because of, again, what Luke Fickell said at the press conference today. It seemed very clear to me that, hey, he's like, yeah, I don't know. We want to play these guys more. Even in the press conference after the game, he said, I don't know why you didn't see Lamb more. I don't know why you didn't see these guys more, which, again, then I put a lot more maybe the blame on Luke Fickell and saying, hey, if you think these guys need to play, you need to get on your position coaches and say, hey, these dudes need to get in there. I don't care if they say they're not tired. If they say they're not tired, great, play more of them. Like that's kind of how I'm looking at it. So maybe we'll see some adjustments this week. I don't think South Dakota is going to play us any different. I think they know that, yeah, we're going to have a tough time getting open on those corners. I don't think they have the athletes to do that. And so you're going to see them probably play a similar game plan. And so we'll get to see, are we going to make changes? Again, it's kind of like what we would talk about when we go to offense, and maybe we can touch on this later, running into 8-man boxes. Like, it's just not, at some point, it's just not a good strategy. Like, it's just not going to work. And it's the same thing in the reverse. If you're trying to stop, 12, 13 personnel running the ball with 2 down linemen and 2 linebackers, it's not going to work. So that's kind of where I look at that and I say I think it was on game plan. Not to I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I completely agreeing with you there. I posted a screenshot in a Twitter group I think we're both a part of. You're in that one. And someone's like, dude, we have like 6 guys in the box. They're in 12 personnel right now. It's not going to work.
Mismatches. Yeah.
And that's a very good point. Talk to me about linebackers, though, because that is the other sticking point, because I went back and I rewatched it. I think it's got to be week 1 aggressiveness, a little week 1 nerves.
Yeah.
First game in Madison. Listen, Chaney is almost like a kid who got a new sports car. He's faster. And he's
much faster. I think he's almost faster to the point where he doesn't even realize how fast he is.
He overran something that I don't expect from Jake Chaney, but I kind of think that's a week 1 thing.
Yeah, I do too, because if you actually go back to last year, a lot of the plays where we really overran and weren't doing great fits, a lot of that was early in the season. It got much better as the season went on. Mm-hmm. I think it's, I kind of felt like there was a weird energy going into the game. I don't know if you felt it, but it felt like we were really, really tense, ready to go, excited, things like that. And that's kind of feel like I saw that in the game. I think that gets fixed. I think, part of it is, again, when you're running a light front and the 2 linebackers are essentially at that point linemen. So D linemen. So you might as well think of it as like a 4-2. And if you're getting washed, then you have 2 linebackers covering basically the entirety of the defense. It's a new scheme. I know the coaches have said this, the players have said this. They came out in a different scheme than they had prepared for. You can say who you want about blame there. The reality is it's different than what they were ready for. And that will throw you off. You're going to, you think they're going to do one thing, they pattern change. And now you're like, oh crap, I got to, this isn't what they did in film. I got to adjust that. And people are human. They're going to make mistakes. On top of that, it's, it's week 1. You're excited. You're maybe a little bit too high energy. Maybe it's easy to fall for a read. There was one play in particular I remember where I believe it was Pius got in the backfield on a RPO play. And instead of, attacking the mesh point, he just went for the quarterback and quarterback handed it off and we get gashes for, 5-10 yards. That should have been a dead play. But again, it's just, it's week 1 things. In my opinion, those are week 1 mistakes.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth there. And to your point, much like last year, I thought the defense adjusted and the defense was better in the second half. It tightened up, and that's what Tressel did last year. But now you got to start a little quicker, man, because you can't wait that long against. To your point, you said, I bet you South Dakota attacks us the same way. I bet you every school attacks us the same way. Why wouldn't you? You don't want to. It's not that Bama can't throw on us, but why
would you do that? Why would you attack the strength?
Yeah, so
that's an ego thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, every team's going to attack us that way. I kind of think as this season goes on, if you want this defense to, if you want to shore up maybe one of the potential weaknesses, you got to lean on that secondary. You got to say, we're going to play less zone. You and I talked about this before the show. I was kind of shocked that they were playing so conservatively because Western Michigan wasn't throwing the ball. Put a safety in the box, island up your corners who can hold up really well. I just thought it wasn't an aggressive enough game plan for me. And I think some of that is just week 1. I expect that to change a little bit going forward.
Well, and it's funny you say that because you can kind of say the same thing about the offense. I think when you look at this game, and I think someone might have mentioned this to me, but it kind of almost felt like we were watching a glorified practice, almost like a preseason game with what they were showing. I mean, they were playing a lot of drop zone, which is wild to me because you have an All-American corner on one side. You have probably your best improved player on the other side who was an All-American at D2. And you're dropping them in zones, 3 deep zones. For what purpose? You're playing a team that returned all of their line. Their entire offensive line came back, and they all between them have several hundred starts. They're all veterans. You have a 7th-year quarterback who knows what a zone is. He knows where to go when there's a zone because he's played football for 7 years.
That's wild.
So it's like, why would you do that? That's where the pass plays they got them because we were in zone. When we were in man, they couldn't throw anywhere. There was no one open. And so that's where I'm like, to that point, I'm like, hey, put another linebacker or put another, if it's clear, and it was very clear by the second drive that they had no interest in trying to challenge our secondary, throw another D lineman in there, keep your linebackers in there, and let them play one-on-one. They're not going to be able to do it. Or at least they shouldn't be able to do it. Maybe get 1 or 2 there. Yeah, but more than likely, you're going to stop the run, and they're not going to be able to pass on our secondary. And then they're going to get in their heads, okay, our game plan's not working, and now you got them in a position where you can do a lot of this 2-4 stuff, and you can take advantage of that because now they're thinking about it. We never took them off their game plan. And that's where, again, we made the changes in the second half, but, you got to be able to do that a little sooner, in my opinion. It was clear Fickell said, and I'm not talking about, this is coming from just a straight up any kind of business, any kind of anything perspective. I mean, you were in the military. One of the big things is no plan survives first contact with the enemy. As soon as you realize our plan wasn't going to work, you should have scrapped it immediately and started making these things happen. And I'm not trying to arm chair quarterback this thing. I'm sure there's a lot of other things that go into it, but that's just what I saw. And I think you saw it. I think a lot of the fans saw it. That's where I'm sitting here and I'm like, maybe there's some big glaring thing we're all missing, but it seems pretty straightforward to me.
Yeah, I think you hit on it earlier too. It's probably a little. I hate to use the word arrogance because I don't want to throw the word around, but a bit of a, well, we're Wisconsin or Western Michigan. We don't really need to adjust. Like we're gonna grind them out, and quite frankly, they did. Right? Like they did grind them out.
But we haven't been that Wisconsin in 5 years.
Agreed.
You know what I'm saying?
Even then, the adjustment, right? Like even then, even if you are gonna grind them out, that doesn't make it the smarter move than to just adjust to something that's gonna be easier.
Well, and think about it like this, and this is where I these games I don't like is because you're Iowa today. How do you feel about your team? If you're an Iowa player, how do you feel? Right?
I feel good.
You just kicked the shit out of a team. You beat them 40-0, and you feel great. You're like, hey, our defense is same good old Iowa defense it's always been. Our offense now looks like we can actually score points and know what we're doing. So that's awesome, right? We played an objectively more difficult team, probably by a large margin. And we won, which is great. We showed a lot of grit. We showed a lot of determination. The team never quit. The team never showed any ounce of giving up, which is good. But we're sitting here like, okay, we got a lot of problems. And now maybe it's good we got to see our problems. Maybe that's a good thing. Who knows? But and maybe it's good we're having these kinds of conversations. Maybe the coaches are too. But you sit back, you're like, I don't know how this is going to play out when the season comes in. And the worst thing is, some of the players might be thinking that too. A Pius who comes in is everybody's looking at, hey, this might be a dark horse, all conference guy. He's going to be probably one of our leading set guys. He gets runs over in the first half. And then by the time he's able to pass rush, I mean, it's already sort of the end of the game. Western Michigan is in it. They're playing hard. Maybe his confidence is shook. Maybe a Daryl Peterson. Maybe I didn't improve from last year. Those are the things you worry about. Now, you hope that the leadership is such that doesn't happen. That's what you hope. But hope to me is not a strategy, and that's where I get concerned. That's where I get nervous. But that said, I think our team is better than it showed on Friday. I don't think everybody going to practices were all that off in what they thought our run defense and our pass defense looked like, or what our run game even looked like. I just think that, the plan we had going into the game, it was conservative. It was to get out of there with a W. And I don't know if that's how you want to approach a game like that. I mean, it's college football. You can lose any Sunday or Saturday. So.
Right. And I think they played right into their hands. A conservative game plan was exactly what they wanted. Shorten the game. Let's keep it. Let's keep it between the hashes. That's exactly what they wanted, and it played right into their hands. All right, we're gonna take a quick break. I'm gonna come back with Curtis. We're gonna talk some stock up players, ask them or positions, whatever it is. Some things coming out of this. Again, a lot of people have hit on some of the frustrations and the concerns. I want to end this show on things that he feels specifically better about. There's a couple I got. We're gonna do stock up players coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show over at 5 Hour Energy. I've talked about my boys over at 5 Hour. Actually, my boys, I wish they were, because then I get some free hookups. But listen, today I'm framing out our garage. We're working on that because I still am recording in my basement. So I got to get my studios built. 5 Hour Energy helps me, put up some drywall, which I did, I would say, mostly successfully today. A little hit or miss there. By the way, anybody in the 715 know how to do drywall, please hit me up on Twitter. I got you. But 5 Hour Energy helps me do all these things I got to get done. Great flavors, no sugar, which is incredible for me because I don't need any of that nonsense. And I had the watermelon the other day. That's kind of my go-to, but they have a bunch of other flavors right now. Great offer. Go to 5hourenergy.com, locked on CFB to receive 20% off your order. 5hourenergy.com, locked on CFB, receive 20% off your order. Good through September 30th, cannot be combined with their promotions and is not good on subscription orders, but good for everything else. Build your 12-pack, your 24-pack. 5hourenergy.com, locked on CFB. Get your 20% off. Let's get Caleb back in, or Curtis back in. I'm sorry. I was thinking of Caleb the other day. Let's go some stock up stuff. I'm going to give you my first one. I think my first stock up is Cade Yakimelli. For a guy who I think a lot of us, at least I thought, might fall out of this rotation because I figured they would try to get the freshman into it. I thought Aker would get a few more reps. I knew the top two would be the lead dogs. He wasn't on the first series, right? And got reps right away out of the gate. And I thought he looked pretty good. He gives you some athleticism and size out of that spot. He can catch the ball. He gets north and south really quick if there's a crease. I'm going to stock up Cade Yakimelli.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he played well. I think we talked about this a little bit in the past, but it's, hey, these guys are experienced. They've been in the situations like this before. I would have loved to see the freshmen. I'd love to have an opportunity to see them play more. But I think you got to go with guys who've got the experience when they're ready to go in the game, and they've been in the fire before. They've had to pass block. They've had to get hit over the middle catching a pass. I think you want someone like that in there. And yeah, I saw a lot of really good from Cade. He had a really good burst. I thought he got to the outside on some runs, which was really good. So I thought he played well. When I look at a stock up guy, for me, one of the guys that I think might be a little bit unheralded and kind of under the radar is Riley Nowakowski. I thought he showed a lot of leadership. I thought he did really well in the pass game. He's not a guy I think we were looking at coming into the season saying, hey, this is going to be one of our top most important players on the squad. But, he's a guy who played his role well. He was pretty good in blocking. He was great in the pass game. I think, not to say that we would rather have a lot of our tight ends in over some of our receiving combinations we could potentially have. But I think if he's your number one tight end, what I saw from him on Friday, I'm not overly upset about that.
I like that one. So when I did my rewatch, literally my first note of my rewatch, when I just do my data dump, because I'm just seeing things I like and I'm typing it, I said Nowakowski pretty good at the point of attack as a blocker. I thought he was demonstratably better than Tucker Ashcraft in the blocking role. Tucker's still very inconsistent. I thought Nowakowski was much more solid. I think that's a great one. I'm going to stock up Elijah Hills. I don't know if that's an obvious one because he had the sack late, but I think even if you take that sack out, which was super impressive, considering we didn't have any other tackle for losses that entire game, Curtis, which is...
Again, it goes into game plan. I just don't think we had the right one.
But even with that game plan, shouldn't you just bust one at some point? Like, shouldn't just one guy shed a block at some point?
Yeah,
sorry, I mean, back into the negative, but
no. I mean, yeah, I think probably. And like I said, I don't think we have. And I'm not trying to be negative here, but it's not like we have a guy who's going to come in and be, a game wrecker like a TJ Watt would be, right? Like a TJ Watt, I would expect to get a sack in a game like that. We don't have that right now. Maybe one of these guys could develop into it over the course of the season, but it hasn't shown, on film in a game yet. So it hasn't shown up, and they got to figure it out. In a game when maybe you're still trying to figure it out, and you're not set up in a way that's advantageous to what they're doing. And keep in mind, Western Michigan was not giving us opportunities to sack them. They very rarely were playing in a situation in which we had their tight ends weren't running routes. You know what I'm saying? Like they were pass pro. They were max protecting. They were rollouts. They were play action. Yep. So it's not. And if they weren't doing that, it was a quick pass. It was quick out to the running back. It was a quick little hit to the receiver. Like it wasn't. They weren't giving us opportunities to sack them, right? And so that's where it's like, yeah, could we have broken one? Maybe based on how the game went, based on the length of the game. I think if that game, let's say, if it was old rules where the clock doesn't run the whole first half, you're starting to get to the point in the game where I think Western Michigan was starting to collapse, and you probably would have seen a lot more sacks. But that's kind of where I think, again, I don't read into that a ton. We'll see kind of how this progresses over the course of the season. I think we'll get better. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you. Elijah Hills, I think he should have played more. I think Brandon Lane should have got on the field. I think Dylan Johnson should have played more. I mean, Dylan Johnson had 6 snaps. I think he could have had more. I think you could have seen, a Brandon Lane come in Again, I don't need to keep going down this path, but I just feel like those are some things you could have seen.
Yeah, this is the stock up portion, and I got us derailed. Yeah, Elijah Hills for sure. Anybody else that you look back and you said kind of, yeah, really stock up there?
Well, I'll say this. I think stock up the secondary.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when you rewatch that game, I mean, the only pass plays that were completed were when they were in zone. And quite frankly, it's, Western Michigan had a 7-year quarterback who's probably seen every zone ever and just knows what to do with the ball when it's in zone, and that's what he did well. But overall, I mean, when it was man coverage, no one was getting open. They didn't even think about trying to test it deep. They didn't even throw at Ricardo Hallman at all the whole game. And then when they tried to throw over the top of Lucas, we got an interception. So, I think overall the secondary is definitely a strength of this defense. And I made this note in the Discord, and I am curious. I don't know if this is true or not, but maybe this is just what to expect from a Fickell defense moving forward. If you watch Cincinnati when they were really good, teams still got yards on them. It wasn't like they were stopping everybody cold. Jim Leonard, I think, was the way he ran their defense. It was a lot of 3 and outs, a lot of Darren teams to throw it deep because they're not going to run, right? So that was where maybe we're shifting from one form of defense to more of a bend don't break, and that's where maybe it's just this is what it looks like. Maybe we play a team like a Rutgers or a team like a Illinois or a team like a Iowa, and like they move the ball, but they don't score. They don't go deep. They don't throw it over the top of us. They can't complete those passes, and that's what allows us to beat them. And so that's what I wonder. Maybe that's just the way our defense is going to look moving forward.
It's funny as you were describing that, I was thinking, oh, like our offense. You mean we'll just move the ball but not take deep shots, not complete deep passes?
Yeah, we can go on another podcast about
the
offense.
I will say I still think it's early to really say this is what the defense looks like, because this is not the defensive line they ultimately want. Like they still are reloading that spot. I do think it's a different defense. I think you're 100% correct. There is going to be a little bit more bend. I think ultimately they want more disruption. Like that is their grand plan is a little more chaos, a little more exotic chaos, a little more disruption. But definitely, I think to your point, there is more bend in their defense than you would see from the really good Leonard defenses. But the secondary was awesome. By the way, you mentioned a couple of the guys. Wohler had really nice coverage on a deep crosser. Lofi had great coverage on a.
I'll say this: if the season plays out the way that game did against Western Michigan, Wohler's going to be our leading tackler again.
It drives me nuts. He let him again though. He let him again though.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap up there. Curtis is always awesome. Always very grateful for your time, man. Great insight. Really, really sharp football guy. So I'm always thrilled when we get Curtis on the show. For everyone else listening, thank you guys so much. Go make it Locked On College Football your second listen of the day, 24/7 stream, all the biggest news. That's over on our Locked On channel. Go check them out. On Wisconsin, we got Nick Osen coming up. We got Donnie coming up from Rivals. We got Coach coming back up. We'll do a Coach's Corner. So a lot of great content coming up as always. On Wisconsin, Curtis, like you think next week's going to look cleaner?
I hope. What I'll say is I think if we saw a lot of the issues, I think the coaching staff definitely saw a lot of the issues. I know people who know the coaching staff that will point out to them the issues that we saw. So that's encouraging. But I think you could hear it in Fickell's voice in the post game and in this morning. I mean, he's not happy with the performance, and I can tell he put a lot of that on himself. He knows he's a better coach than that. He knows the team can play better than they played on Friday, and that makes me think that they're going to address a lot of these issues, and we're going to look better coming out the gate on Saturday.
That's a great way to wrap it up. On Wisconsin, and we will talk tomorrow.